Who wrote it? Went the unanswered question to Donald Trump today, and what's more, who's in charge of the White House? Who's running the place? Who's the author of that column in yesterday's New York Times, credited to an anonymous senior White House official who labels Trump impetuous, ineffective, and amoral, reckless enough that so-called resistors in his inner circle now act behind his back for the good of the country? It was the question of the day. Did you write it? To the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. No. To Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
It's not mine.
CBC's Katie Simpson put it to Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
Do you know who the author of the op-ed is?
He didn't reply. Yes, there's even a Las Vegas odds-on favorite, Vice President Mike Pence, who today also denied he wrote it.
Well, I think it's a disgrace.
The Times today gave no hint about the author.
This is The Daily.
But its podcast, The Daily, interviewed editor James Dow, who communicated directly with the Trump insider.
I would guess that this person has reached a breaking point.
On whether Dow thinks the writer wants to comfort Americans by underlining some insiders are resisting Trump, or whether the op-ed is a call to action or even an atonement.
That's a great question, and I cannot answer definitively.
Mm-hmm.
My guess, it's a little bit of all those things.
And yet, say some, the op-ed itself may change little in the minds of voters.
This is an electorate that's really seen quite a lot already in terms of this administration. People's opinions about Trump are pretty much baked in a positive or negative direction.
Or, as a Republican senator put it today, despite all the public denials, a bigger issue might well be finding a Trump insider who couldn't write that op-ed. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
So some other heavyweight names there, but others have also denied being the author, including Defense Secretary James Mattis, National Security Advisor John Bolton. But they are not alone. If there really is a so-called resistance movement at work in the highest levels of the administration, nobody is admitting to being a member. The denials just keep coming. Dan Coats does not get along with Trump and is soon to leave his post as the Director of National Intelligence, but he says no, it wasn't him, as does Trump's long-suffering Attorney General. Despite months of public potshots from the president, Jeff Sessions, too, denies writing it. Even First Lady Melania Trump has weighed in, condemning the author as a coward. Not that many people thought it was her behind it or anything, but it's notable that she spoke out. Well, somebody wrote this thing, and whether they want to cop to it or not, it's having a big impact right now, and who knows how widely its effects might actually reach. Let's get into that with Philip Bump. He's a national correspondent with The Washington Post. Good to see you, Philip. I would imagine that the best game in Washington right now is trying to figure out who wrote this. Are we any closer tonight to knowing that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've had this spate of people who've come out and said that they did not write it, but that's exactly what the person who wrote it probably would say if asked. Where there's this, someone dug up today this great Wall Street Journal article from 1974 in which Deep Throat, Mark Felt, was asked, "Are you Deep Throat?" And he said, "No, I'm not. I made the Wall Street Journal." That's what's going to happen in this case, too. And I don't think we're any closer to finding out who actually did do it.
So how is this act of resistance then being perceived in Washington? Is it being considered an honorable thing or quite the opposite?
Well, it certainly is mixed, as with most things in Washington. But I would say the general consensus is that this person should have or should shortly identify themselves, identify what their position is, to answer some of the questions about, you know, how significant their role is, about who else they may have spoken with, how deep this resistance thing goes within the administration. There's a sense that by being anonymous, they sort of took an easier path forward than they might otherwise have done so. But obviously, all of that sort of fades in the background compared with the question, first of all, of who it actually was, and then second of all, the significance of what was actually said and how deep this sentiment goes within the administration.
Okay, so what about the possible impact then of this? Obviously, you know, the president isn't going anywhere, but could there be a political price to pay in the midterms, for instance? Is this the kind of thing that would influence voters?
I'm not terribly convinced that it will. I mean, this election for Trump's base, I think we talk about them all the time. They're certainly energized in support of President Trump. The question is whether or not they're actually going to translate that into coming out in November. But what I think what this does do is it is the first time we have heard from someone in the administration, albeit we don't know who exactly it is, but we've heard from someone in the administration that all of the stories, all of the reporting is essentially true. That Bob Woodward's new book, that those stories, if not true in every single specific detail, are broadly true about what it's like inside the White House. I think that will help energize Trump's opponents and, more importantly, energize some independents who are a little wary about Trump's administration.
Okay, Philip, thanks for your perspective tonight. Appreciate it a lot.
Of course.